I look at three major forces that are happening now, haven't happened in our lifetimes, but have happened many times in history. And those three major forces are the creation of a lot of debt and the printing of a lot of money to buy that debt, particularly because the government is running large deficits. And so they don't have enough money, so that government has to print that money. So that creation of all of that debt and its financial implications and its economic implications is one force.
Ray Dalio is a renowned American investor, hedge fund manager, and the founder of the world's largest hedge fund, Bridgewater Associates, which he launched from his apartment in 1975. With decades of experience studying global markets and economies, Dalio has built himself a huge financial empire and bigger reputation to go with it. In 2021, Dalio published his international masterpiece and New York Times bestseller, Principles for Dealing with a Changing World Order: Why Nations Fail and Succeed. In the text, Dalio delves into the most turbulent economic and political periods, taking readers through 5 centuries of the rise and fall of the greatest empires in history. Dalio's sojourn through 500 years of history is not only to educate readers about the turbulence of the past, but also to identify the timeless and universal forces that cause power shifts and the forms in which they appear now. As he presents the successes and failures of major economies throughout history, Dalio helps us understand the critical factors that make countries succeed and, most importantly, fail. According to Dalio, these factors often appear in phases and have been perfectly constant through the rise and fall of many empires and dynasties. These phases are: number 1, the rise. This is when a country is able to gain power and design a working system that helps it increase its wealth, power, and status among other countries. Number 2, the top, is when a country is able to sustain the successes that fuel this rise. According to Dalio, this is often the beginning of the end for such countries and markets. At the top, the country is so used to the privilege of being at the top that it begins to make disastrous policies that weaken its spending power in the long run. At this stage, the empire seems strong, but its finances are weak and sustained only by borrowing or excessive money printing. Number 3, naturally the decline comes after the top. At this stage, the country's debts have become so large that it can no longer borrow to repay its debts. Then comes periods of economic downturn, wide political gaps, increasing internal conflict, a revolution or civil war, and finally the big collapse. In a recent interview, Dalio discusses the various phases of this transition and relates each phase with the present state of the American economy. Between the banking sector crisis, the country's overwhelming debt, and the constant threat to the dollar's dominance by China and Russia, Dalio is convinced that we are about to witness the end of another great empire. Before we listen to Ray Dalio's interview, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Thanks and enjoy the video.
The second force is the internal conflict, the amount of conflict that's internally, largely due to the largest wealth gaps that we've had since the 30s. And that produces populism of the left and the right, particularly when there are financial difficulties. The third force is the rising power, the challenging the existing power, largely in the form of China and to some extent Russia. So let's call it the great power conflict, because in 1945, there's this cycle. You have a war, then after a war, you have winners, and the winners determine the rules of the game. And then there's this evolution of others becoming more competitive, and then you have a conflict again for who's in control. So we have that dynamic taking place. I went back and studied history, the last 500 years, on these cycles. There are big cycles that last about 75 years, give or take about 50 years, and of rises and declines. And I put that out because I think it's so important people understand that. I put it out in a book called The Changing World Order and in a free video called The Changing World Order. So when we look at each one of those, they're important. I also learned in studying history that there were 2 other influences that were very big, and you could see them. The first was acts of nature. such as droughts, floods, and pandemics, the changes over time in the evolution over time of people's learning and the technologies they make. So I'd say there are the really 5 big influences that drive everything. So in the book, I write out, there's like a disease, like a cancer. You see stage 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have these things, you could look at it and you could diagnose, and you see it moving from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and to 6. You could see that taking place. And each time you come closer to a bad set of circumstances, bad financial circumstances, and bad fighting over things.
According to Dalio, the United States easily checks all the boxes of superpower that is fast losing its dominance. The unraveling, of course, did not begin today. But we are at a point where the minor and major patches are no longer enough to hold the leaks in, and everywhere is about to get flooded. And according to Dalio, it's going to be a massive flood that would sweep several sectors of the economy, from the banking sector to real estate, to venture capital and private equity entities and the tech industry, to name a few. The dominoes are toppling, and they are toppling faster than many investors are prepared for. Let's get back to Dalio's interview as he describes just how much of a precarious situation we are in.
The dominoes are beginning to fall. I mean, okay, you know what the next dominoes are, and you can imagine the other dominoes. So, for example, they're not going to buy the debt. A lot of them are not. Those who bought the debt and have too much debt and have debt losses on government debt are not going to buy buy more of that debt, for example, and therefore, when the government sells more of the debt, there's not going to be an adequate number of buyers for that debt. You know that those who are hurting because they have those losses won't make loans, and a lot of those loans went to real estate, particularly commercial real estate. And you know that for various reasons in commercial real estate, that we don't use it the same way and so on. So you're going to have problems in commercial real estate. You know that this kind of money was also financing venture capital and private equity entities that also have cash flow problems, challenges. And so you know that that funding is not going to be there in the same way. You know, as a result of these things, that a number of entities will cut costs and in their various ways. And so depending on that, the job market is changing. And you see it, for example, in tech jobs and other, if you're in some of those areas that are getting squeezed, and you see the same thing by and large, happening internationally. So you can see also that if you said, what is the value of those assets that are being held, that value has gone down a lot. And because it was bought on leverage, as you described, because it is bought on leverage, there are bad losses in different places. And that's happening at the same time as we have an internal conflict taking place, such as the presidential election. So we're going to come into the presidential, and it's not just presidential election. Of course, it's a number of senators, congressmen, and so on, and who are at each other's throats about this, and who are going to fight with each other. Okay, and fight to win, not probably respect the rules as much, but fight to win for their side. And that's happening at the same time as we have the situation with China, most importantly, China and Russia, in terms of the issues, in terms of their things to fight over. For example, even there's going to be an election in Taiwan that'll also have a big bearing on this whole thing. So we know, I think, pretty much that we're going to have financial problems and economic problems at the same time as we have this internal fighting and this external risky situation.
In 2020, Dalio warned Americans to be cautious of China's rise as it was emerging as a global superpower. He described a trip he made to the East Asian country in 1984 and how high-ranking Chinese officials marveled at basic technology such as calculators. Dalio argued further that China was on the same level of technological advancement as the United States and would take the lead by 2025. Today, China is leading the United States in several metrics and seems to be on the edge of claiming reserve currency status, the chief selling point of the United States in the international marketplace. All things considered, we might indeed be witnessing the death of an old superpower and the birth of a new global superpower. What are your thoughts on Ray Dalio's interview and gloomy predictions for the U.S. economy? Please drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.